Thank you, Tara. Thank you, team. Thank you, everybody. Give yourselves a round of applause for excellent preparation today, and let's have a great, powerful conversation in unity.
Wonderful. Any questions? And can everybody please silence your phones so we don't have the phones going off during the live stream? All right, wonderful. We're going to be starting in 2 minutes. Miguel, and when they hit the countdown, will they know when it's live? When will they know? They'll say
Most part, yes. I got about 95%.
all right, thank you.
God just got to buy it. It was good. It was therapeutic. I found pictures from the 1960s. I found some stuff right here. I found some interesting stuff from the 1960s.
Okay, I got you. We'll be live in 10 seconds. I'll be counting you in. Starting now, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. My name is Marc Morial. I'm proud to lead the National Urban League, and we are excited today to convene this Demand Diversity Roundtable. I want to thank the 18 organizational leaders who joined with us last year, who joined with us and had the courage to stand on the front lines. We all showed up when this was an idea. We showed up in the first week of the administration when the first anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion executive orders were released. And we were committed to stand up then, and we are committed once again to stand up today. So I'm proud to announce that that 18 has now grown to 31 strong. Give yourselves a hand. 31 strong, with new participants and organizations joining. And you're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, from everyone who's here today, because the story of the roundtable is simple. When the numbers of us grows, so does the power of what we can do. That is the idea. Together and in unity, there's power and strength. Look at this room. This is what America looks like. Black, Latino, Asian, Arab, white, Jewish, believers, non-believers, straight, LGBTQ, immigrants, and people and families that have been here for generations. This is what America looks like. This is not a coalition of special interests. This is the American family. And we come today because that family and the essence of what we believe in is under threat. The state of America is a state of emergency. And a year into this new administration, the United States is not just divided, it is damaged. It is damaged constitutionally, it is damaged culturally, and it is damaged economically. The headline: chaos, confusion, uncertainty. In 2024, our economic growth rate was 3%. In 2025, post-tariffs, post-DOGE, post the assault on DE&I, and post the big, ugly bill, the U.S. growth rate lagged global growth and was down to below 2%. Each percentage point costs us 1.5 million jobs. So these policies, the cost of them, at least in terms of jobs, is significant. And most projections for this year, 2026, do not reach 2%. This strategy of distraction has been detrimental. The administration should not be focused on Greenland. They need to be focused on Green Street, and they need to be focused on Main Street, where men and women and families are having a tough time making ends meet. What we've witnessed isn't policy disagreements. It's a sustained assault on a simple proposition that this nation belongs to all of us. All of us. All of us. From the White House to the federal agencies to a Supreme Court hostile to long-standing civil rights protections, we have watched an effort to erase diversity under whatever name it appears. We have seen efforts to censor truth and history, to punish institutions and people for acknowledging who we are as a nation, to punish people for daring to use their voice of dissent and disagreement. And the impact is not theoretical. It's showing up in paychecks and pink slips, in classrooms, in courtrooms, in neighborhoods, and communities. For Black Americans, the historic advances in Black unemployment have stopped. And a year later, the Black unemployment rate is nearly double what it was a year ago. Black women are holding the heaviest burden. Hundreds of thousands pushed out of the workforce, significantly higher than any other group. My inbox tells the story. It's full of highly capable women who shouldn't be searching for work, but they are. And it isn't coincidence, it's consequence. It happens when protections that make opportunity real are dismantled. When equal opportunity is recast as dangerous. And while all of this is happening, the rules are being rewritten so that the hyper-rich, the super-rich, the less than 1,000 billionaires in this country get richer. More than 400 billion shifted away from everyday Americans, moms and kids, seniors and elderly, for their health care to benefit this tiny group of billionaires. Consider this point. The combined wealth of less than 1,000 US billionaires is almost twice the wealth of the entire bottom half of US households. That's 66 million of us. Let me repeat that. The wealth of billionaires, there are less than 1,000 of them, is twice as much as the combined wealth of the bottom half of US households. This is the America of 2025. Our immigrant communities are living in abject and absolute fear, indiscriminate, discriminatory, brutal ICE raids, arbitrary arrests, harassment of innocent, hardworking people, far more than the so-called dangerous criminals they claim to target. Families are being ripped and torn apart. Communities are living in fear. Businesses are unable to open. Children are not going to school. And people are living in fear in America of 2025. In America at its 250th birthday. Citizens swept up and killed. From towns to big cities, Minneapolis, Portland, Chicago, and beyond. The American dream is being raided in broad daylight. And still, we're told that what we see and what we hear with our own eyes and ears isn't true. All the while, universities, museums, medical research, and nonpartisan justice efforts are silenced. Words are banned. History is edited. This is not order. It is organized, orchestrated injustice. injustice. So we must ask ourselves, honestly and without euphemism, is this who we want to be? And if not, what are we prepared to do? The rhetoric is that equality equals oppression. The rhetoric is somehow that white men and our white male brothers are under siege, denied advancements, denied opportunities, and overlooked. The reality is that today white men hold close to 90% of the most powerful C-suite roles in America, and over 50% of major corporate board seats. The rhetoric is that the American people reject diversity, and they want it rolled back. The reality is a truth that may surprise some, and that is that despite a year of relentless attacks by roughly a 2-to-1 margin, voters say that focusing on increasing diversity, equity, inclusion is more of a good thing than a bad thing. And most voters hold a positive view of equal opportunity, of DE&I, of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The loud voices do not speak for the majority of the American people. And we're here today at the National Press Club to affirm that we must stand together on that point, that what we stand for here is not as a group of special interest groups, not as a group of people who are in the wilderness, but as a group of leaders who speak for the majority of the American people. Congress, do you hear us? White House, do you hear us? Corporate leaders, labor leaders, faith leaders, hear us loudly and clearly. We stand with the majority of the American people. And we're here to name, repair, rebuild what has been broken, to remind our nation that there's another way. We're here to declare that this is a state of emergency for American democracy and equal opportunity. But we're here to reclaim something, and it's an American vision of diversity, not as a slogan, not as a box-checking exercise, not as a partisan weapon, but as a way of living and a way of governing. We're here to activate power, civic, political, moral power, with, by, and for the people. Our task is to insist that our leaders who work for us live up, speak up to our nation's ideals. That means organizing. That means showing up. It means using every tool available to us. Yes, we are in a state of emergency, but we are in a state of possibility. And that means we must do things in order to get different results. We say to every elected official and every candidate, choose the Constitution over chaos, equal opportunity over exclusion, the whole American family over division. And that is why we will showcase later on an idea to hold our leaders accountable and to help our constituents in communities across the nation send a message about what we want our leaders to stand for in this moment of controversy. So with miles to go before we sleep, I want to thank each of you for joining today, not of like mind, but of like mission. Together, we will continue to advance the most important work of our time. Are you ready? Now let us get to work. Thank you. Tara Murray.
Thank you so much, Marc, for grounding us in the urgency of the moment that we face, and for explaining why our collective work as the Demand Diversity Roundtable matters now more than ever. I am Tara Murray. I serve as Executive Director of the National Urban League's Washington Bureau, and I will be the facilitator for today's conversation. We want to begin the conversation with what the data actually shows about where the American public stands on the acronym DEI, which stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And to do that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alicia Simmons of Hart Research, who will walk us through key findings from their new national polling research. Alicia?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share our research about public opinion on diversity, equity, and inclusion with you. The findings that I will highlight today are from a 2-year mixed method project conducted in partnership between Hart Research and Bellwether Research. This project is methodologically robust. Our quantitative research entailed 2 nationally representative surveys capturing the voices of over 6,000 voters. Our qualitative research consisted of 23 focus groups and 5 online discussion boards. Here, we had in-depth conversations with a variety of voter segments, including white suburban women, men who voted for Biden in 2020 and Trump in 2024. We talked to Black and Latino professionals, community college students, Gen Z college graduates, and so many more. There are 4 primary conclusions that I would like to share with you. First, the central finding of our work is that the public is far more aligned with the values underlying DEI than the prevailing political narrative would suggest. In our focus groups and discussion boards, we asked people to talk to us about a variety of values that shape their personal and public lives. We discussed the meaning of these values, their importance for a healthy society, and what happens in their absence. We found that the underlying principles of DEI, equal opportunity, inclusion, fairness, dignity, and respect, they are broadly supported by the public. Moreover, the people are supportive of the overarching umbrella of DEI. In our 2025 survey, we asked voters about their perception of the phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion, and found that 71% rated it positively. Given the public's value-based alignment with DEI, many of the most aggressive anti-DEI attacks fall flat. Such attacks are perceived as divisive, politically motivated, or as a distraction from real problems. For instance, the public has little appetite for efforts to constrain scientific research to avoid a woke agenda, and they have little taste for changing history in order to fit an anti-DEI narrative. In our focus groups, one participant remarked, "I think attacks on DEI silence history. We learn so much from history, and not being able to learn about different cultures encourages us to repeat some of the mistakes we've done in the past." Our second finding is that equal opportunity is especially resonant across demographic and political lines and is widely viewed as something society should actively work toward, not simply hope will happen. The collective ideal of equal opportunity taps into universal aspirations that Americans have for themselves and their families. Everyone wants a fair shot. In our 2025 survey, we asked voters about their perception of the phrase equal opportunity, and 89% rated it positively. Importantly, the public believes that equal opportunity needs to be deliberately cultivated, not left to natural growth. For instance, one of our focus group participants asserted, "Historically, we've seen it doesn't just happen. People say, oh, we're not going to do anything, and then eventually, through progressiveness, in the future, the stuff will even out. That's not how it works." Due to the public's proactive orientation toward equal opportunity, they broadly believe that private corporations, universities, and institutions should retain the freedom to make decisions about hiring, admissions, and internal practices without government interference. Our conversations with voters show that institutions can stand firm against political pressure to dismantle DEI and still maintain public legitimacy and support. Our third finding is that people recognize that society's playing field is not equal. This creates meaningful common ground for the need for action. In our qualitative research, we asked voters to discuss whether they believe that some people face disadvantages or challenges because of their backgrounds, identities, or who they are. We found that there is a shared awareness of the structural advantages and disadvantages that shape life opportunities. This social problem is the impetus for DEI, and this point is already one with the public. The fourth and final finding that I'd like to share today is that messages grounded in opening doors, allowing merit to flourish, strengthening communities, and ensuring that everyone has a fair shot are among the most persuasive. Such messages tap into key values such as equal opportunity, inclusion, and fairness. For example, this was one of our best testing messages. DEI doesn't determine who gets hired or admitted. That is based on qualifications. It just helps make sure that the door is open wide enough so that people who have traditionally had less access to opportunities get the chance to be considered and, if selected, feel comfortable and supported once they are there. To conclude, it has been a pleasure to share our research about public opinion on diversity, equity, and inclusion with you this morning. If you take one message away from my remarks, please let it be that the public supports the core value of equal opportunity, and leaders have more permission to lean in than they may think. I hope that I have made clear that equal opportunity is a deeply held, shared value among the American public. They rally around it. Institutional leaders in the private sector can be secure in this knowledge and can confidently take the steps needed to turn our demands for diversity into a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons, for sharing your insightful research with us. We're going to move now quickly into 2 lightning rounds of discussion with leaders at the round table. And for the first round, you're going to hear from Melanie Campbell with National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, John Yang with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, Juan Proaño with League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, Fatima Goss Graves with National Women's Law Center, Maya Berry with Arab American Institute, and Jody Rabhan with National Council of Jewish Women. And our first question is rooted in the findings that Dr. Simmons just shared with us. Each speaker will respond to this question, and it is, what is the most important thing that this polling research clarifies or corrects about how the public views diversity and equal opportunity? Melanie, let's start with you, and then we'll go down the table.
Thank you so much. First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
Marc, thank you for your leadership in pulling us all together. Honored to be here with all of my civil rights colleagues. What I garnered, Tara, from the Bellwether Hart research is that it clarifies that the great divide on diversity and equal opportunity is a manufactured myth. It shows a 2-to-1 majority of Americans believe focusing on diversity and equal opportunity is a good thing. The public is demanding an end, not to end diversity, equity, inclusion, and I say also accessibility, but everyone wants an equal opportunity to achieve economically, educationally, and socially. However, we must be clear-eyed about the current climate. we are witnessing a Black recession in our community by design. As of this month, January 2026, the data paints a sobering picture. Black unemployment is almost double the national employment rate at almost 8%. The policy-driven economic breakdown keeps the 85% wealth gap between median white households and median Black households at an all-time high. When you dismantle DEI, you aren't just cutting programs, you are cutting the only lifelines meant to bridge the wealth gap. The assault on Black women is particularly surgical. We are often the first to be impacted by these rollbacks, yet research shows we have never been the primary beneficiaries of them. In 2025 alone, more than 300,000 Black women were pushed out of the labor force, partly due to the gutting of DEI protections and federal job cuts. Most Black women are heads of our households, so when you target Black women, you target the stability of Black families. We also know that white men, as Marc mentioned, have been impacted. We are at a state of emergency, as my brother stated. We know that DEIA is on the ballot. The election will determine whether we allow the clock to be turned back to a segregated society. I believe in the American dream that Dr. King taught us about and he fought and died for. I believe we, the people, must and will unite and win a future. Our children will be able to not only survive the challenges they will face in their lives, they will be able to live out their dreams. So united, we will win. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Marc, for organizing us, and thank you to the researchers, in particular for including Asian Americans in their study. Too often, one of the things that we see is polling data, survey data, does not include the Asian American population. And when we look at the polls, it is consistent with what we all understand about the community as a whole, is wide, broad support for diversity, equity, and inclusion, stable support for that, and if anything, increased support even for the acronym DEI when people understand what that term entails. Specific to the Asian American community, a recent study that was done shows that over 90% of Asian Americans recognize that diversity is a strength in this country. So when I do the cost-benefit analysis around this, it's quite easy. The majority of Americans support and recognize that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs benefits and causes communities to have equal opportunities. In contrast, when I look specifically at the Asian American community, only 10% of the public thinks that diversity, equity, and inclusion somehow hurts Asian Americans. So it is clear that we should have these programs. The other thing that I think about is what this means for the Asian American community with respect to discrimination. Recent studies have shown, 2 different studies have shown that over 30% of Asian Americans have experienced discrimination, often or very often. Now we know that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs help to eliminate discrimination, help to tell the full story of the United States, including some of the ugliness of the United States, but it leads to us understanding how all of our communities have contributed to this country. That is why it's so important to have these diversity programs. So if anything, the polling suggests that we should not abandon our values around diversity and that we actually have room and responsibility to lead. The question before institutions is not whether equal opportunity and fairness are popular enough, but whether they have the willingness, the leadership to exercise on this mandate. Quite simply, we demand diversity because the public demands diversity, and they deserve diversity. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I also want to give my thanks to Marc Morial, Tara Murray, and the National Urban League for convening today's Demand Diversity Roundtable, and also to Dr. Simmons and the research team for grounding this conversation in facts. For me, here's what this new research clarifies and what it corrects. The American public is much more aligned with equal opportunity than the conservative media suggests. In fact, nearly 9 in 10 voters view equal opportunity positively, and the majority say that focusing on DE&I in workplaces, education, and business is critically important. But the polling also tells us something else. We have to be clear about what DEI is and what it is not. The public strongly supports fair consideration for qualified people who have been overlooked. 72% support giving additional consideration to qualified candidates from underrepresented groups, and 69% support doing the same for qualified candidates from a lower income background. That's not a fringe idea. That is the mainstream America saying talent is everywhere and opportunity should be too. For Latino communities, the moment is personal. Roughly 3 in 10 voters recognize that Hispanic men and women face discrimination in hiring, yet only about a third say DE&I policies help Hispanics. The gap is a warning light. It means that our lived experience is real, but our story isn't being heard clearly enough, and it is being drowned out by these myths. So to keep it plainly, DE&I is not the opposite of merit. Equal opportunity is the guardrail that keeps merit from being distorted by biased, by closed networks, and by opaque hiring and pay practices. And when voters look to the future, what they prioritize are practical reforms that families can actually feel: transparency in pay and hiring, accessibility, and emergency childcare. These kinds of policies will help working families and have people be able to compete and thrive in our economy.
So thank you, Marc and Tara and the Urban League for gathering us. Again, I'm Fatima Goss-Graves. I'm the president and CEO at the National Women's Law Center. And thank you also, Dr. Simmons, for this critical research. It's an honor to be here. In the last year, we have seen this assault on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as the core scapegoat used for all sorts of things: to fire federal workers, to cut civil rights enforcement offices, to threaten businesses and universities. And all of this has come at a huge cost. I want to thank Melanie for continuing to lift the unemployment rate for Black women, which has risen even as jobs have been added month over month. And what we learned this year is that when they said illegal DEI, they meant things like cutting Head Start programs and shutting down rape crisis centers and ending the tracking of infant and maternal mortality. And we at the National Women's Law Center have held on to the good news that we know that the president never had the power to change the Constitution or to change federal laws. But what has been gratifying by this research is that the public also sees through it. They're clear about his agenda. They're not distracted by it. So I see very good news in this research, that the American people are opposed to what I see as dangerous and cruel actions, but also that they support the core value of equal opportunity. I just want to end by naming, I came this morning from the EEOC, which is the independent agency that was established to protect workers from discrimination, along with the Civil Rights Act. And as we are in this room speaking, the EEOC is preparing to rescind the critical guidance that protects workers from harassment in this country, despite the fact that they received 35,000 charges of harassment just in 2024. Everyday people in this country both need those protections, but they see through it. I see that in the polling. Starting my morning by facing an agency that's supposed to protect workers from discrimination, doing the opposite is sobering, but it's also why it's gratifying to be reminded by this data and also reminded by the leaders in this room that we have both the strategy and confidence to do the work we need to do. So thank you.
When Marc and our amazing partners in NUL brought us together a year ago to have this conversation, it was based on the kind of campaigning and rhetoric and policy suggestions that were put out there. A year later, we've arrived at a place, executive orders, congressional hearings, a variety of ways in which we have been told to believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion is potentially a criminal matter. literally saying this is discriminatory and there are laws that will prevent it from being able to be implemented. What I took away from the data that is most heartening is that no matter what algorithm you can put out there, no matter what keyword searches you can do, no matter what companies need to run their websites through to get on the right side of this, is that 71% of the American people still say this is a value-based judgment and I'm not comfortable with what you're projecting. Equal opportunity is easy to understand because on some level, it's actually how we kind of relate as Americans to this concept. I believe in an inclusive democracy because that's kind of how it's supposed to be. And when you come at us with things that don't seem right, no matter how much, eventually people land in the right place on this. And there are sort of 4 key things to remember. The first is the federal government workforce. My colleagues have noted this. We've hundreds of thousands of black women being removed from the federal workforce. If you want to weaponize the federal government, first you have to remove a federal government employment workforce that looks like all of America. Second is the issue of our institutions and universities. I don't want my kids going to a school that isn't going to teach them about everything fully. This idea that there are certain ideas that work, certain ideas that don't, that's not how we're supposed to do this. When Marc says censorship, we need to hear it for what it is. If you reject an inclusive democracy, you're talking about censorship. Third, I want to note public life. Minnesota, Chicago, what's starting in Maine, the kind of brutality we're seeing, it is to remove the diversity of America from what we know America to be on our streets. It will be rejected, it has been rejected, and people are resisting that in ways. Understand how much that's tied to DEI. Finally, the issue of our corporate friends and companies. Look, this is gonna end, and there's gonna be another side of this. And what you have to do is to think about, what did you do during this period? It's important for your bottom line, but it's also important for your legacy. So you have to think about, am I doing the right thing that represents both an inclusive democracy and good business practices? And folks, I gotta tell you, as an Arab American, I understand what exclusion looks like. A few days ago in my local high school, someone graffitied horrific language, both anti-Arab and anti-Muslim. It actually said specifically, nuke Palestinians. Trust me when I say to you, getting to the point of those things happening is because we have attempted to reject diversity, equity, inclusion, equal opportunity. I almost don't care what we call it, just understand we better fight like hell for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. I want to thank Marc, Tara, the whole National Urban League team, Dr. Simmons, and my esteemed colleagues. I'm Jody Rabhan, Executive Vice President at National Council of Jewish Women. I'm so thrilled to be with you all this morning. NCJW has been working with our 250,000 change makers across the country for over 130 years toward equity and inclusion. And the polling reflects what we know, right? That every group that's got access to real power and opportunity really helps our democracy churn and work. It's the only way. And the public overwhelmingly agrees, as we heard from the polling. It may be that they're misled about what diversity actually means. It's been framed as zero-sum or preferential, when most people we know support fairness, support dignity, systems that work for everybody. And Juan mentioned a gap. There is a gap not about values, but in understanding. And as women, we know what this is like. In 2026, women still earn roughly 77 cents on the dollar compared to white men. Couple that with things like abortion bans, lack of childcare, lack of paid leave. These are structural barriers. These are not individual failures. And these are just some examples of what unequal opportunity can look like in practice for women. And as Jews, we know how this can be compounded. We insist on safety and dignity for our community, but we reject a vision that ends with us, right? Or just any single group. Even with anti-Semitism rising, we understand that we are not only asking who is represented, but is the system itself fair? And I think you heard in the polling that that resonates. So what comes next? We know that we've got some work to do, narrative change work, right? We've got to change the public understanding of what true equal opportunity means, and we have to couple it with policy, paid leave, childcare, reproductive health care access, the whole panoply of it, strong hate crimes protections. This is how we defend our democracy, by widening the circle, not shrinking it. Put simply, DEI matters because our democracy fails when anyone is left out. We know as women, we know as Jews that when marginalized communities are told to wait their turn, they'll never get one. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists for the first round. It's clear what the data says. It's clear that our communities support equal opportunity. And so I think the question is why, if our communities so overwhelmingly support equal opportunity, are we seeing so much capitulation and so much backing away from these values? We're going to turn to our second round, and we're moving from public sentiment to leadership choices. We're going to hear from Janai Nelson with Legal Defense Fund, Damon Hewitt with Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Alphonso David with Global Black Economic Forum, Ron Busby with U.S. Black Chambers of Commerce, Sarah Vonderlip with Minority Business Enterprise Legal Defense and Education Fund, Madalene Mielke with Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, Nicole Austin-Hillery with Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and Rosa Diaz with Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. The question for this round is, based on the data that we've been talking about, based on what our communities are clearly saying, what do other institutional leaders in academia, in government, and corporations need to stop doing? And what do they need to start doing instead? Janai, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll proceed down the table.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Marc, for this incredible convening 1 year later. We see the state of our country as a result of these anti-diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility attacks. I am happy to talk about the question that you asked, Tara. I'm Janai Nelson, President and Director Counsel of LDF, the Legal Defense Fund, and I want to thank the consultants for creating this data because we need facts. We need facts and we need truth about this attack on DIA. And what the data makes clear is something that LDF has been reiterating for corporate leaders since these attacks began, and that is that capitulating to the Trump regime and its allies is a choice. It is a choice. It is not a mandate. And if you are making that choice, it is the wrong one. When leaders disregard the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, they are putting their reputations, their productivity, their profits, and their legal standing at risk. Studies have shown that companies with workforces that represent the full range of talent in America are more innovative, more productive, and more profitable. Many DEI programs are designed to help employers reduce barriers to equal employment opportunities and to comply with civil rights laws like Title VII. So when diversity is driven out of the workplace, it also drives high turnover, low productivity, and employee disengagement, costing companies over $1 trillion annually. And over the past years, consumers have responded to this capitulation very strongly. And we encourage consumers to continue to use their purchasing power through boycotts and boycotts, and shareholders too must pay attention. Corporate leaders must also understand that by making the choice to ignore these core values, they are increasing their risk of liability for discrimination. So at LDF, we tell employees to follow the law and not the lies. Here are the facts. Concerning diversity statements, numerous cases have held that the existence of a diversity policy or a statement reflecting a desire to increase diversity is not itself evidence of discrimination. Courts have also dismissed challenges to anti-bias trainings, holding that they do not create a hostile work environment, nor are they racially discriminatory employment practices that could form the basis of a retaliation claim. And when it comes to recruiting, courts have held that efforts to address disparities in the applicant pool and to expand the number of qualified candidates by actively recruiting underrepresented groups are lawful. Those are the facts. But this Trump regime would tell you that it's a lie. And the most recent one has to do with the False Claims Act, quite ironically. The recent threats to weaponize the False Claims Act against federal contractors and grantees has no valid legal grounding. It is a threat with no legal precedent and no established policy principles. So we must follow the facts. And the Trump regime will continue to lie, but it can't change those facts. So the number one thing that leaders need to do right now is follow the law and follow the lead of consumers and the public. We must take concrete steps to ensure everyone has a fair shot at success. And LDF's Equal Protection Initiative has many resources online to guide you. The future of our country depends on making sure our institutions and our economy work for all of us. And the best way to combat this bully regime is with bold leadership, which everyone around this table is demonstrating, and that we ask corporate and civil society to join us in advancing. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Damon Hewitt, President of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Thank you, National Urban League, Marc Morial, Tara Murray, and Alicia Simmons, Dr. Simmons from Hart Research for this incredible grounding and practical understanding and knowledge. Based on this data, what's clear is that we have to be, all leaders have to be, in our sector and even in the corporate sector, flexible and nimble in our approach and clear in our messaging. Unfortunately, many people have been led to believe that fairness for some means loss for others. The data shows that this zero-sum framing actually twists the truth and is actually inconsistent with people's core beliefs. Some people believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion is focused only on the employment context about who gets a job. It's that, but it's more. And many people think it's only focused on race and gender. It is that, but it is also much more. So what should all leaders do instead in our sectors and also in other sectors as well? 4 things. First, we have to root this work in exactly what Dr. Simmons said, in universally shared values of fairness, opportunity, dignity, and respect. That's not difficult because that's what we do anyway, right? It's just speaking, frankly, the simple truth. These values resonate across all lines of race, gender, class, what have you. The second thing is we need more of what we see in this coalition and in this room today. We need authentic solidarity across communities. Note the word authentic, not just showing up for cameras, but working with each other behind the scenes. That happens in workplaces, it happens in communities. It can actually happen nationwide, and frankly, it does. We know that when coalitions work together, it actually changes how people think about the issues. When AAJC, John Yang's organization, and others joined with ours and other organizations focused on the Black community to defend righteous affirmative action and higher ed admissions plans, it changed how some people viewed the issues when they tried to drive wedges between communities. Third thing is, we do have to broaden the story, but not water down the message. We do not want milquetoast. We want clarity, but clarity that in which everyone can see themselves. We know how to do this. There's a trilogy of cases we filed at the Lawyers Committee. One is representing Chicago Women in Trades, a group that trains primarily Black and Latino women to get into construction trades. That case is being argued on appeal in Chicago in the 7th Circuit in just a week from now. We filed a case on behalf of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which actually helps to close digital divides, and also a case on behalf of a group called Freedom Network USA, which fights human trafficking. The through line is all of them are being targeted to lose grant opportunities and even contracting opportunities because their work is said to involve quote unquote illegal DEI. Simply not true. 4th thing and final thing, we must stop apologizing for the truth. Facts are facts. The research lays it out, Marc Morial lays it out, Melanie, Campbell, Fatima, Graves laid it out. The facts are facts about who's being impacted negatively. The question is, can we redefine merit in a way where we see everyone as being part of that? So we need to be nimble in our message, but not water down the truth. We believe the research shows people will meet us, Americans will meet us exactly where the truth stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Marc and the National Urban League for convening us at this moment when clarity, not confusion, is what business leaders need the most. I'm Alphonso David. I'm a civil rights attorney, and I run the Global Black Economic Forum, which is an international enterprise focused on advancing economic opportunity for marginalized communities. Let me start with a simple truth that keeps getting buried by the noise. Diversity is not illegal. What is happening is a flood of misinformation that is distorting how business leaders are assessing risk. Here's the reality. Diversity is not a risk. The real risk is misreading the law, misreading the market, and misreading the future. Because when companies misread the market, they lose. According to a report that the Global Black Economic Forum issued, minority-owned businesses represent 22% of all employer firms, yet they only receive 6% of federal contract dollars. That means 94% of contract payments go to white-owned companies. That is not a neutral outcome. It's a capital being misallocated at scale. Misreading the market means overlooking businesses that generate more than $360 billion in annual economic output and sustain more than 1 million jobs. It means shrinking your supplier base, limiting innovation, and weakening resilience at the exact moment that global competition is intensifying. Misreading the future means believing that you can build a growth strategy that excludes the fastest growing segments of the economy and still win. You cannot. Markets do not reward fear, they reward alignment with reality. And misreading the law means allowing misinformation to substitute for legal analysis. The data shows that pulling back diversity does not reduce risk. It creates it by narrowing opportunity, increasing inefficiencies, disconnecting companies from the economy they claim they want to lead. So when companies attempt to pull back from diversity initiatives based on panic headlines or bad legal advice, they are not reducing risk. They're actually creating it. Reputational risk looks like abandoning commitments to consumers and talent that can see right through it. Financial risk looks like shrinking your market while competitors are actually expanding theirs. Legal risk looks like walking away from compliance best practices while discrimination complaints rise. And yet, some leaders are making decisions inside a culture of confusion, conflation, and fear. They're conflating executive orders with laws. They're conflating noise with the law. They're treating political theater as legal reality. Leadership requires asking harder questions. What does the law actually say? Not what a press release says. What does the data show about performance, about retention, about growth? And who actually benefits when companies retreat from inclusion and who pays the price? So here's the bottom line. You are not building a company of the future if diversity is optional. You're not competitive globally if your strategy is narrow and myopic. You're not resilient if fear rather than the facts drives your decisions. Courage is not reckless, it's really disciplined. Courage is following the data. Courage is leading markets instead of causing backlash. And let's remember, for those business leaders that may not have all of the information, shareholders in large companies are rejecting attacks on diversity. In fact, 30 of the largest US companies, collectively worth more than $13 trillion, from Apple to American Express, from Costco to Goldman Sachs, saw 100% of anti-diversity proposals fail last year. This moment is about asking business leaders to decide whether they will be shaped by misinformation or anchored in reality. And history is clear about companies that are anchored in reality. They end with higher revenues, greater information, greater innovation, and greater success. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Marc. Thank you to the National Urban League and the rest of the speakers that are here with me this morning. My name is Ron Busby. I'm the president and CEO of the United States Black Chambers, Inc. We represent 385,000 Black-owned businesses and 176 chambers across the country. You've heard the data. The American people haven't turned against diversity. They haven't turned against equal opportunity. So let's be clear what's happening. Corporate retreat is a choice. We've heard that earlier today. It's a leadership choice, and it's the wrong one. Now, the question has been asked, what leaders should stop doing, and I'll tell you. Stop making announcements without accountability. Stop showing up for the photo op and disappearing when it's time to sign the contract. Commitments without contracts aren't commitments, they're just press releases. What we do know is that the American consumer has spoken. And what America's consumers are saying is that when they spend their dollars with firms that appreciate diversity, equity, inclusion, it is their way of fighting back against the attacks on DE&I. You see, 1 in 8 Americans are now saying that they are looking to support Black-owned businesses on a weekly basis. That's Black, white, Asian, Hispanic consumers. 25% of all Americans are saying that spending money with Black and minority firms is positive for the country. 40% of young people under the age of 40 are saying that they are now looking to support Black-owned businesses on a weekly basis. So let me say it in this way. Putting it in writing, putting in a budget, putting Black businesses in your supply chain, not as a favor, but because it makes business sense. Let me tell you something that the U.S. Black Chamber is doing. Last year, the USBC acquired the historic former BET headquarters here in Washington, D.C., an 8-acre lot housing a 100,000 square foot corporate offices, a production studio, office space, training facilities. We didn't ask for a donation. We bought it. We own it. And we're building a revenue-generating hub for Black business development, incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, media production. This isn't charity. This is infrastructure, and it's ours. Apple shareholders just voted 99-1 to keep diversity programs. Costco said the same. The market is speaking, so corporate America has a choice. Invest in the infrastructure with us, or watch us build it on our own without you. We're not retreating. The question is, are you? Thank you.
Thank you so much to the National Urban League, to Marc, Tara, Faith, for everything you've done to pull this together. It's extraordinary. My name is Sarah Vonderlip. I'm the Chief Counsel of the Minority Business Enterprise Legal Defense and Education Fund. I want institutional leaders to stop avoiding talking about race discrimination and its impact. When we sidestep reality, we hide the problem and guarantee that nobody will mobilize to fix it. Race discrimination against minority business owners and entrepreneurs is not theoretical. It is severe, pervasive, and measurable. It suppresses innovation, it slows economic growth, it weakens democratic participation, because it signals to entire communities that their contributions and ideas are not welcome, rather than essential. If leaders refuse to talk about this plainly, the public never understands it, and thus does not build the will to stop it. If we do not describe the problem, we should not be surprised when no one solves it. In this context, silence is not neutrality, it's permission. On the flip side, I want leaders to start talking openly about the institutional and personal benefits created by diversity, equity, and inclusion. When people hear only the controversy and not about the benefits, they assume diversity, equity, and inclusion is symbolic rather than structural. DEI has expanded talent pipelines, improved decision quality, and reduced blind spots inside of many institutions. It has supported economic mobility for many, many, many diverse groups that were previously excluded. It has increased organizational resilience, creativity, and legitimacy in a diverse marketplace. And as a point of personal privilege, I'm a race discrimination lawyer. But white women in particular have benefited an extraordinary amount from diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. We need to stand up and talk about our pride in participating in one of the extraordinary civil rights advances of our nation. All of us who have benefited need to make that example and talk about it. DEI is not a handout. It's an investment strategy. Let's start saying that out loud.
Good morning. Thank you to Marc and Tara and the National Urban League for convening us, and thank you to Dr. Simmons for your research. I am Madalene Mielke. I'm the president and CEO of the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, otherwise known as APAICS. At APAICS, our mission is clear. It's to increase Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander representation at every level of public service. The AA and HPI community is one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in the United States, with 7% of the population, and yet we only make up about 1% of elected officials nationwide. As we do this work, I also appreciate my counterparts at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute as allies. There are 3 key points that frame this work. First and foremost, our leaders need to stop using DEI as a buzzword. When we reduce our values to slogans, we lose the power to drive real change. Those 3 letters represent our commitment to meaningful action. Second, leaders must reject and dismantle the Asian American model minority myth. This harmful narrative suggests that our communities are never in need, systemically excluding us from DEI framework and denying our communities from vital resources and visibility. And third, we must reject the idea that AA and NHPI communities are a monolith. Our leaders need to continue to demand disaggregated data in order to understand the unique, diverse challenges faced by each of our subgroups. Because how can our communities be served if we are not accurately measured, if we are measured at all? Instead, our leaders need to reaffirm that DEI is not a replacement for merit. We can be inclusive and considerate while still prioritizing excellence. We can do both. To ensure that these aren't just more empty promises, we need transparency through shared reporting and metrics. For equal opportunity to be truly equal, it must include all of our communities with all of our voices. Equitable representation ensures that we have a seat at the table where decisions are made and that our voices are heard everywhere, especially in the halls of power. So let's move past promises and continue our work of real measurable inclusion for all. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nicole Austin-Hillery, and I have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I'm grateful to Marc Morial and the National Urban League and the other leaders who are sitting around this table with us this morning. You know, you've heard from the other leaders already about the data, you've heard about the law, you've heard about what other corporations are doing. You asked Tara the question what we should start doing, what needs to start happening, and what needs to stop happening. And I want to focus us on 2 key constituencies that we haven't talked about, but that are truly at the heart of this fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 1 is our future leaders. We are focusing on what is happening today, but we have to also focus on what will tomorrow bring. At the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, we were founded 50 years ago this year. And we were founded because those original members of the Congressional Black Caucus were smart enough to know that we needed to level the playing field so that opportunities would exist for future leaders who did not have the same opportunities as others, and to whom doors were closed for centuries. We have to start investing in that future and understanding that if we want tomorrow to look different than what we are seeing today and what we are talking about today, we have to ensure that regardless of race, income, gender, sexual orientation, whether your parents are bus drivers or school teachers, that you have opportunities to be great and to be the next leaders of the very corporations that we are talking about today, that you have the opportunity to be the next generation of elected officials that we are looking to today to make a difference. And secondly, in addition to future leaders, we have to start investing more in the communities and talking to the communities about what they want to see and changes they want to have happen. We heard from the researchers this morning what the American people are saying, that 71% of them are saying that they believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We as leaders of organizations, elected officials, corporate leaders have to go into communities, we have to talk to them, we have to ask them what they want, start giving them what they want. We have to give them research and data like we talked about this morning, like we do at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, so that they can be empowered. The country needs to hear, and the world, in fact, needs to hear, not just from leaders like us around the table, they need to hear from the everyday people who are taking their children to school, who are raising their families, who are going into these grocery stores, who are going into community centers, so that they can say, this is how we want to live, this is the kind of inclusion we want to see, and this is the future that we want for our communities and for our country. That is the kind of courage that is required, not just by us, but by everyone who believes in equity and inclusion and who believes in a stronger society for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Rosa Diaz, Chief of Staff of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to the National Urban League for convening this very important conversation. You know, I'll echo a lot of the sentiment that has already been expressed by the leaders around the table. I think the data, what it showed is what CHCI has always known to be true, that when you give individuals equal opportunity, when you give them access, when you give them a hand and give them a network and strengthen their resolve, they will succeed. At CHCI, we were founded 48 years ago, similar to what CBCS and APAICS were founded to do, which was to create an opportunity for Latino, qualified Latino leaders to get an opportunity on the Hill and in the public and the private sector. Our results speak for themselves. We've had members of Congress, leaders on the private and the public sectors, teachers, lawyers. They've been successful. When you invest in the leadership pipeline, it works. So part of what this research of equal opportunities and fairness, what we know that is true is that we need to stop assuming that our communities don't have the power and ability that we do, because we do. And we need to continue to strengthen that pipeline. We need to invest in that pipeline, because now more than ever, we need to invest in those emerging leaders so that tomorrow is brighter and better, not just for our communities, but for the entire country.
Can I get another round of applause for the participants from our first two rounds? Thank you very much. As we move into our next segment, we've heard a lot about how our communities feel, about what leaders should be deciding as they determine how to move forward in this current climate. But I also want to put forward something that is equally important. Our resistance has mattered. This year we have seen real pushback, we've seen real consequences, and we have seen real proof that the public is not surrendering its values. We've seen that as we've heard in the courts. There have been 553 legal challenges to this administration's actions, and federal district courts have ruled against the administration roughly 77% of the time. We've also seen it in the streets. The public has shown up. More than 12 million people across all 50 states participated in the No Kings protest, rejecting authoritarianism and affirming the fight for a multiracial democracy. And as Ron mentioned, we've seen it in the marketplace as well. We've seen that accountability. After Target rolled back its commitment, it was the Black church that called for a national fast, a boycott that contributed to the company's estimated $84 billion decline in market value last year. And so though we know that we will have to fight harder still, we have not been silenced in this moment. We have organized and we have resisted. And so that brings me to the next voice in our conversation, because some of the most impactful resistance that we've seen this past year has come from state attorneys general who have used their authority to defend civil rights, to enforce the law, and to block rollbacks in real time. To speak to what that leadership has looked like in practice, we are honored today to hear from Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul.
Well, thank you, Marc, and the National Urban League for convening this powerful and diverse room. I come from another powerful and diverse room of Democratic attorneys general who are in this fight with you. You know, on day 2 of the current presidential administration, when my colleagues and I sued to protect birthright citizenship, that was our first lawsuit, and it was a personal one to me. You know, the president, it's personal to me because I'm born to Haitian immigrants, and my mother was not yet naturalized at the time of my birth, so I am a birthright citizen. Interestingly, the president latched on to an argument made, and some of the arguments were coming from our community, that the birthright citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment was restricted to freed slaves. And ironically, he latched onto that while at the same time utilizing the 14th Amendment at large to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since then, my colleagues and I have filed over 77 multi-state lawsuits, some of them directly related to federal attacks on DEI and voting rights. And we've been overwhelmingly successful. My colleagues and I are watching what's happening across the country, and we're concerned about the long-term ramifications. Places like my hometown, Chicago, and Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, California, and of course, Minneapolis, Minnesota, are grappling with attempted militarization of the cities. Communities are facing mass abductions off the streets without due process. And recently, the Supreme Court, in an emergency docket opinion drafted by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, sanctioned racial profiling in immigration enforcement, despite the stark departure from precedent and the disturbing consequences for law-abiding members of our community. And these clearly unconstitutional stops came to be known as Kavanaugh stops. I don't believe he liked that potential impact on his legacy. In a subsequent Supreme Court opinion involving the deployment of the National Guard to Illinois, a case that my office handled, he reversed course. In a 6-3 decision, the court sided with us and denied the federal government's request for a stay on a temporary restraining order granted that prevented the deployment of the National Guard. But hidden in footnote 4 of Justice Kavanaugh's concurring opinion was a declaration that immigration stops based on race were improper. It's evidence that if we raise our voice, we can change the direction of decisions. However, just a couple of days ago, a police chief in Minnesota announced that multiple off-duty police officers of color reported being stopped by ICE or CBP officers based on their race. People are understandably scared, confused, and angry, as I am. Last week, my office filed a lawsuit challenging ICE and CBP Tactics and my colleague Keith Ellison in Minnesota filed a similar lawsuit. We are collectively using the tools in our toolbox to defend our state's residents and stop these unlawful acts. One of the primary tools has been litigation. If these acts of racial profiling continue, you know that the attacks on diversity will continue. Beyond litigation, we've also used legal guidance documents clarifying the state of the law on civil rights and DEIA programs issued to educational institutions, corporations, and nonprofit organizations. One thing that I hope has been clear to all of you is that my colleagues and I see the fight for our civil rights and the continued battle for diversity, inclusion, and equal opportunity for all as a joint effort in which partnership is crucial. Just as my AG colleagues and I have used multi-state strategy to ensure that as many state residents as possible benefit from our court victories, we recognize that the best advocacy strategy in the court of public opinion also requires many state and organizational voices harmonizing together. We want to work with community leaders to help affected communities get information and the protection they need. Attacks on civil rights are unlawful, immoral, and illegal. Attacks on DEIA are attempts to divide us and to create a world that ignores meaningful contributions. Right now, we're preparing our most ambitious partnership activity yet, the launch of a national campaign to amplify our message that we need everyone working together to protect civil rights, to advocate for DEI, and to champion increased opportunity for all. This campaign is called Liberty, Justice, and Opportunity for All and represents a joint effort between state attorneys general and many of the groups in this room to make sure people hear the message. We know that we need a large-scale and fully collaborative effort to combat the pervasive narrative that seeks to villainize DEIA and make civil rights protections seem unnecessary or defunct. And together we must fight back to change this pervasive narrative that attacks on DEIA are good, because they aren't. I want to thank you, Marc, and I want to thank all of you all here for coming together. Our fight must be sustained. It must be very intentional, and it must be a loud one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Raoul, for your leadership and for the leadership of the state AGs that have been on the front lines with many of us in this room working to combat the attacks that we've seen over this past year. We're now going to move into our final two lightning rounds. I want to emphasize lightning rounds. Okay, so the next round focuses on consequences. And we're going to hear from Brenda Castillo with National Hispanic Media Coalition, Ashley Upkins with the National Bar Association, David Morgan with the Multicultural Media and Correspondence Association, Aaron Haynes with National Association of Black Journalists, Naomi Takuyan Underwood with Asian American Journalists Association, Brian Lee with National Organization of Minority Architects, and Tanya Clay House with African American Policy Forum. And the question for each speaker in this round is, what have been and what must be the consequences when leaders ignore the strong public support that we've been hearing about for equal opportunity? Brenda, we're going to start with you and then we'll proceed down the table.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Marc and Tara, for your leadership. And Tara, I promised when I rehearsed, it was 2 minutes, okay? I'm an indigenous Latina feminist, Brenda Victoria Castillo, president and CEO, the very first woman president and CEO of the National Hispanic Media Coalition. We are a 40-year-old plus civil and human rights organization. You heard the polling. It confirmed what we already knew to be true. The majority of people in this country embraces DEIA. It's telling us that we still see strength in our differences. So why are we being told a distorted narrative? There's no question that the administration is distorting the truth. Why? They are trying to control the narrative. How? By controlling the media. Their end goal is to control public's perception in order to divide us, control our vote. That's the truth. My message to media corporations: hold on to your values. Do not cave in. Report on facts and truth. The public needs facts and truth in order to make vital decisions when it comes to caring for themselves, their health, the economy, their neighbors, and their children's future. Look, the truth is the U.S. is projected to become even more diverse by 2045, when diverse Americans are projected to account for 50.3% of the population. So my message to all corporations: we are your consumers, your staff, your customers, your future. We decide whether you're going to exist or not in the future. The truth is, if you're anti-DEIA, you are anti-business. My message to the public: flex your buying power in your buying decisions. If a company is not supporting your community, do not purchase their product, their service. The power lies within you. So don't believe their false narrative. You know why? Because only you can write your own narrative. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, President Morial, Sarah, for having us here today. Ashley Upkins of the National Bar Association. We are over 100 years old this year, and we know far too much about what happens when there's a lack of inclusion and access, because we were born as an organization out of rejection. We represent the interests of over 67,000 Black attorneys, judges, law professors, and law students across the nation. We know from history and from law, when equality is sidelined, democracy erodes. When leaders act against the will of the people on issues of opportunity, the result is not neutrality, it's harm. Harm to workers locked out of advancement, harm to students who are denied access to pathways of excellence, harm to communities who are stripped of legal protection. The first consequence is loss of trust. Institutions lose legitimacy. People do not start to disengage, not because they are apathetic, but because they're being told explicitly and implicitly that the system is no longer built for them. The second consequence is legal and economic instability. When equal opportunity is weakened, litigation increases, workplaces fracture, talent pipelines shrink, businesses lose innovation. Courts become battlegrounds for rights that should never have ever been up for debate. The costs, both financial and human, are borne disproportionately by communities that are already pushed to the margins. The third consequence is strategic backlash. Efforts to dismantle equity do not eliminate demand for fairness, they sharpen it. We are seeing a more informed public, multiracial coalitions. So the question is not what happens when leaders ignore public support, but what must happen next. There must be accountability. When leaders ignore the will of the people, they should expect a coordinated response across courts, markets, and civic institutions. There must be coordination. Statements are not enough. Litigation, legislation, economic pressure, and narrative strategy must be moved together. There must be courage. At the National Bar Association, we understand that rights are not self-executing. They require defense, they require strategy, and they require leaders willing to act. That is why we stand proudly with the National Urban League, with President Morial, and this coalition, because democracy does not survive on goodwill alone, it survives on enforcement. Thank you.
Thanks, Howard. The simple answer is let the public know and then mobilize. I want to start by acknowledging Marc Morial for recognizing early on that this moment will not be won by messaging alone. It requires collaboration, coordination, mobilization, and critically, ownership of the media and communications infrastructure that makes all of that possible. I'm David Morgan, president of the Multicultural Media and Correspondence Association, a 10-year-old nonprofit advancing diverse media ownership and sustainability. It's an honor to sit at this roundtable with leaders shaping policy, advancing litigation, organizing communities, and defending civil and human rights. MMCA's role is different but complementary. We work to ensure that independent, trusted channels exist so your work can reach communities consistently, credibly, and at scale. Because whoever controls distribution controls whether a story is heard, how it is framed, and whether people are ultimately mobilized. The challenge we face today is the media and communications crisis, not of values, message, or messengers, but of distribution. Mass media face deep credibility issues. Social platforms amplify disinformation while suppressing trusted voices. And search and AI systems are collapsing referral traffic entirely. The good news is that trusted media still exists, although across a fragmented ecosystem. Legacy publishers, I see Dr. Chavis here, podcasters, independent journalists, and creators building new institutions with purpose. They are essential civic infrastructure, even as they remain overlooked and under-resourced. Last October, here at the Press Club, I joined with my colleagues to unveil the MMC Exchange, shared content and community infrastructure designed to connect these outlets, enable collaboration and syndication, and support coordinated messaging and mobilizing at the speed of trust. The MMC Exchange is not just software. It is shared infrastructure for publishing, communication, and community management. It enables civic organizations and media partners to connect trusted networks, communicate through a single dashboard, and share content across outlets and communities, ensuring aligned messaging reaches the masses without relying on social platforms or fragmented tools that we do not own. In a moment that demands speed, consistency, and trust, this kind of coordination is no longer optional. What's needed now is alignment and investment in the exchange and in the broader ecosystem of diverse, trusted media that underpins democratic engagement. I want to acknowledge Dean Jackie Jones at Morgan State's School of Journalism for our partnership in this work. So my closing point is simple. If we're serious about reaching people, countering disinformation, and mobilizing communities, then communications and collaboration infrastructure is foundational. The MMC Exchange is ready to be deployed. What we need now are partners willing to explore, pilot, and help scale this infrastructure together. I want to thank Marc and the National Urban League for your leadership and in not allowing this to be a blind spot, and to all of you for the opportunity to build what comes next together.
So much well said by so many, and I'm so glad to be with you today. Good afternoon. I'm Erin Haynes, and I'm president of the National Association of Black Journalists. I will add to the chorus of gratitude for Marc and for Tara and all the partners convening today for the Demand Diversity Roundtable, because there is strength in diversity, as this gathering is showing. Our meeting is reflecting a shared belief that diversity, equity, and inclusion are foundational to a truly representative and free press, to this nation's success, and to the promise of real opportunity, equal opportunity for everyone. I just have to point out that it is especially meaningful to me that we are gathered here at the National Press Club. It's a place that symbolizes the power of journalism, but also its exclusions. Women journalists were relegated to the balcony of this very ballroom until 1971, when we were finally admitted as equal members. That history is a reminder that diversity is not abstract. Our literal seat at the table has always mattered, and it still does. As the nation's first and largest advocacy organization for journalists of color, the National Association of Black Journalists was founded in 1975 to push for diversity in newsrooms, to support Black journalists at every stage of their careers, and to ensure fair, accurate, and inclusive coverage of communities of color. Shortly put, we declared then as we declare today, exclusion and erasure are anti-democratic. They are not an option for a free and representative press. When the Kerner Commission report was published in 1968, Black journalists made up 5% of American newsrooms. That number today, only 6%. So we definitely have more work to do, and we absolutely intend to do it as we head into our next 50 years. Because we know the consequences, we know the stakes. As journalists, and specifically as Black journalists, we know that diversity is not just a metric. I'm grateful to Dr. Simmons and her research because it reinforces that diversity matters and narrative matters. It is about who gets to tell the stories that shape our national narrative, who gets to hold power accountable, and whose lived experiences are treated as credible and worthy of coverage. Black journalists are the trusted messengers in communities across this country, helping to tell a more honest and accurate story about who we are as a country, as part of the American story. Now, we've mentioned the bottom line cost of abandoning diversity, but let me put it another way. When leaders ignore overwhelming public support for equal opportunity, the consequences are real. Trust erodes, institutions lose legitimacy, communities disengage, and journalism suffers. Because when diversity is dismissed as optional, credibility becomes collateral damage. And this is something that should concern and alarm all Americans. We're seeing this play out right now. Journalists doing their jobs, covering protests, documenting government action, bearing witness in moments of public tension, are increasingly having their credibility challenged and their safety threatened. Recent public warnings aimed at journalists like Don Lemon for covering a protest should concern everyone who believes in a free and independent press. For Black journalists, we know that the stakes are high. We are often on the front lines covering policing, immigration enforcement, civil rights, and systemic inequality, the very places where accountability is most needed. So let today be a reaffirmation that demanding diversity means defending press freedom. NABJ stands with all of you, not only for representation in our institutions, but for a media landscape that reflects the full truth of this nation. Because diversity, press freedom, and democracy do not exist separately. They and we rise and fall together. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Taquian Underwood, and I am the Executive Director of the Asian American Journalists Association. And much appreciation to the National Urban League for holding such an important convening today. AAJA was founded in 1981, one decade before the LA uprisings, wherein the media painted an alarmingly simplistic portrayal of race relations, in effect pitting the Asian American and Black communities in the news against each other. And just 2 decades before 9/11, when the backlash targeted South Asian and Muslim Americans. Diversity and equity, and ensuring that there is AAPI representation in newsroom leadership and entrepreneurship, as well as accurate and equitable representation of AAPIs, is the core of our work. Aaron mentioned the Kerner Commission, and nearly 60 years later, journalism as the first draft of history still does not reflect the experiences of AAPIs and communities of color accurately or enough. Newsrooms have resisted efforts to report diversity numbers. For an industry that prides itself on holding power accountable, the lack of accountability to diversity is a glaring irony. And diversity today in journalism faces many existential threats. As we heard from our members right after the Atlanta shootings, they have had to fight to cover our communities and perspectives. Press freedom, not only here in America, but around the world, is under attack, and journalists face down security and safety threats daily. AAPI journalists in particular, in the field and in their personal time with their families and loved ones, have experienced and continue to experience anti-Asian hate violence, all while attempting to cover it. Layoffs are the norm, and journalists of color are disproportionately affected. Once thriving business models have been shattered by technology and social platforms, eroding trust in the news, and media consolidation, where the bottom line is pure profit, further threatens an already shrunken local news ecosystem and the diversity of news reporting for our local communities. In these challenges are organizing opportunities for all of us to hold journalism accountable and make it more diverse and serve our communities in a much more inclusive way. And so we stand in solidarity as AAJA and commit to working with you all and our fellow diversity groups to hold the line and fight for diverse newsrooms to be workplaces of belonging for AAPIs and journalists of color, and to have equitable pay and leadership opportunities, and for diverse, inclusive, accurate, and trusted coverage of AAPIs and communities of color. Thank you so much for including AAJA today.
Good afternoon. Thank you to Marc, our forever mayor in New Orleans, to Tara, to the National Urban League team, to be a part of this crucial conversation with my colleagues here today. My name is Bryan C. Lee Jr. I am the president of the National Organization of Minority Architects, and we are here today on behalf of the National Organization as an organization that started during the Civil Rights Movement, established in 1971. We are advocates for spatial justice, for equity and diversity in our labor force and in our communities, and our job is to create just and equitable built environments that acknowledge the cultural power of place designed for the public good. So we believe that for nearly every injustice in this world, there's an architecture, a plan, a design that's been built to sustain it. And for this reason, we often see the ramifications of poor leadership and poor policy made manifest through the built environment. So today, I want to be extremely clear about the consequences of our nation leaving behind justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, leaving behind the richness and diversity of culture embedded into our nation's story. So when we speak of our leaders, when we speak of our leadership, we understand that the maintenance and justification of oppressive ideologies only requires those in power to turn a blind eye to the pervasive injustices of our society. Our obligation then is to hold those in power to task, whether that be through the means of withholding or shifting our labor, our dollars, or our votes. And as many colleagues have mentioned today, we are in an emergency. It demands that our process be a democratic one that is justice-centered, and it requires a moonshot. We've seen this in the past, the abolition of unjust practices, the reconstruction of new systems, whether we are in a state, I believe that we are in a new period of reconstruction that requires a new narrative and support leaders that do craft that story with us. Our leaders are responsible for shaping that new narrative. It is, if we tell the story that some people are more worthy of housing than others, then we will build markets of housing that keep people on the edge of poverty and perpetuate housing and homelessness crises. If we tell the story that our communities should be segregated from one another, then we will build neighborhoods, housing, roads, stores, and schools that affirm that separation. If we convince ourselves that the story that our environment is not impacted by our presence, then we will continue to extract from the land, overconsume our forest, and build buildings that demand the majority of our energy and cost. So when we tell ourselves these stories, we invest them into the built environment. Our collective values are validated through the spaces and places that we design. It is essential in any form of justice to recognize that these oppressive systems, we build spaces of monuments in memory to the hubris of oppressive power. So justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our democracy fundamentally offers an opportunity for those subject to these stories that we've told. And lastly, to those in this room and to those in the halls of power, diversity and inclusion is an end goal. And the only way through is through the field of justice and equity. And the force of these systems may often seem insurmountable, but the stories we keep and share, the collection of memories we construct in response to the prevailing conditions will define the worlds we are to build in the future. Thank you.
What is it? Good afternoon. My name's Tanya Clayhouse. I am Senior Strategist with the African American Policy Forum. I bring you greetings on behalf of APF, as well as its president and co-founder, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. APF is an innovative racial justice think tank that brings together academics, activists, policymakers to promote efforts to dismantle structural inequality and promote intersectional justice. Essentially, it brings together those of us around this table and enables us to deconstruct the barriers that don't allow us to have equal opportunity. The main point that I want to bring to you today is this. What are the consequences of leaders not addressing this issue? The consequences are the loss of our democracy. Our democracy is fundamentally tied to the anti-racism and the anti-blackness that is happening right now. That's why we're seeing a narrative that, an uptick in this against diversity, equity, inclusion. DEI, this acronym, cannot be separated from the values that it represents. Those against diversity, equity, inclusion are positioning racism and misogyny as a philosophical debate while ignoring the fact that this is a coordinated campaign to erase Black history and other cultures from this civic life. That is what these anti-DEI attacks are about. What are the 3 points that I want to bring to you? Number one, the erasure of our history. That's why we see the attacks on the Smithsonian. That's why APF brought together many of us together through the Freedom to Learn Coalition in order to fight back against this. Another point I want to uplift is the economic attack that we've heard from others today about how we've seen a 7.8% increase in the unemployment rates of Black women. The third is the capitulation that is happening of many organizations, colleges and universities, school systems that are frightened by the anti-DEI attacks, diversity, equity, inclusion attacks, and therefore capitulating. They should not do that. Why? Because we just saw a win yesterday from those at American Federation of Teachers and Democracy Forward going against that and winning and showing us that what can happen if you actually stand up. So as we talk about this, we have to understand that telling lies on social media does not make it the truth. We are here today in order to make sure that as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of our Black history next month, that we cannot ignore the fact that anti-racism and anti-Blackness are underlying these attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion. We have to eliminate this scarcity mentality that those attacking diversity, equity, inclusion want us to adopt, that we have to understand that we are here to tell the story, that in order to provide opportunity for all of us does not mean that we are diminishing the opportunities for others. The facts are the facts, and as I said, yelling that on social media does not make it the truth, or does not, yelling lies on social media does not make it the truth. We are here to reclaim our narrative. We're here to give everyone permission to do the same. Diversity and equity and inclusion is what makes America great. That is the truth. That is our narrative. And we thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you to our panelists from round 3. Bryan actually set us up nicely for this next panel. We've heard a lot about shifting our votes. We've talked about, what this moment requires. And as we approach the midterm elections later this year, where candidates will be vying for the votes of our community members, this final round focuses on what the moment demands from those seeking our trust and our support. We're going to hear from Janet Murguia with Unidos US, Siobhan Arline-Bradley with National Council of Negro Women, NCNW, Greg Orton with National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, NCAPA, Brian Fair with Southern Poverty Law Center, Guthrie Graves-Fitzsimmons with Interfaith Alliance, Daryl Loban with Common Cause, and we're going to conclude this round with Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis with National Newspaper Publishers Association. So the question for you all is, what does accountability look like for candidates and corporations in 2026? Janet, let's start with you and we'll go down the table.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's an important question, Tara. Our 3 best bets and tools to hold candidates and companies accountable are the power of our voice, the power of our pocketbook, and the power of our vote. I'm so honored to be here. I'm proud to be part of National Urban League's critically important effort, Marc Morial's leadership, to unite civil rights leaders in support of diversity and inclusion And to answer this question, it is so important to utilize all the tools that we have to push back against this administration and its policies this year, and to make sure that we're focusing on the power of our vote. One of the largest Latino voter engagement organizations in the country, Unidos US, which I'm proud to be at the helm of, is working to educate and mobilize voters in this potentially game-changing election. We acknowledge that President Trump made some inroads into the Latino vote in 2024, but it is also true, based on our own polling as well as other polls, that support for President Trump in our community has plummeted due to his extreme policies and actions. For example, our voters' top priority and the main reason why there was a shift to Trump was the economy. Our community wanted and still wants policymakers to address the rising cost of living, especially food, housing, and health care. Yet, this administration has not only ignored the affordability crisis, but its policies have worsened the economic well-being of most Americans. What Latinos have seen instead is an all-out assault on our community and other vulnerable communities, including the push to end DEI, the rollback of civil rights, and most acutely for us, the unlawful, chaotic, and excessive tactics on immigration enforcement. We have said many times that it feels like this administration has declared war on us. It's also a government overreach and abuse of power that the vast majority of Americans do not support. Our focus then is also on holding Congress, especially the majority in Congress, accountable for failing to provide oversight or placing guardrails on this administration's actions. What leaders in Congress have failed to do is nothing less than a dereliction of their constitutional duty and role. I believe that working together, we can maximize our community's vote, our impact in this election, and get the meaningful change we want. And we have the power of our pocketbooks, the ability to leverage our collective buying power to support what we approve and to oppose what we do not. But one thing is certain, and that is that the stakes seem higher and more personal in this time. We need to understand what's really going on, especially when it comes to the elimination of DEI. Ensure that our communities are treated humanely and with dignity and respect. We must also work hard to ensure that these anti-DEI efforts do not blur the lines of inclusion and, in fact, rebuild the walls of exclusion. We need to remember why these programs were established in the first place. They are rooted in the protections defined by the Civil Rights Act. They are about giving all qualified people an equal shot. Opponents of DEI are presenting a false choice between merit and diversity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion have always been about merit. This is about everyone having a fair shot, and DEI and merit go hand in hand. For me, we need to recognize that the fight for diversity and equity and inclusion is not over. We need to never forget that John Lewis marched 60 years ago to protect what DEI represents. So those in the government sector, private sector, you can try to scrub away websites, revise policy statements, eliminate terms in your contracts, but you can never wipe away representation, you can never delete our values, and you will never erase us. We are here using our collective strength and power to demand diversity, equal opportunity, fairness, and we will continue to do that. We will use the power of our voice, the power of our pocketbooks, and the power of our vote. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Siobhan Arline-Bradley, President and CEO of NCNW. Honored to be here with my colleagues around this table to mark and all of those that are here serving as a collective family in this fight. NCNW is an organization that has led for 90 years advocating for and empowering women of African descent, their families, and communities. We are representing over 400 sections or chapters across this country on 113 college campuses. We are also affiliated with 37 national African American women's organizations. To that extent, that means we understand our power, our decision power, our spending power, our voting power, and our educational power, not only to just advance ourselves, but to advance the United States of America. It is known this, that if Black women are not gainfully employed, there will be a shift economically. And NCNW is calling this question an important one. Accountability to us in 2026 for the candidate and the corporation is clear. We have a 3C strategy we're committed to for the rest of our work. A consumer strategy, constituent strategy, and commitment strategy. As a consumer, it stands that growth in our jobs for Black women declined, and the first decline we've seen this high since 2020. Black women are economic indicators to pertaining to the health of our economy. Time magazine has called us the canaries in the coal mine because when we experience economic distress, it's a significant red flag for the entire country. As consumers, I want to be clear. We are, as a community, a $2.1 trillion spending community, and 51% of those spenders are African American women. Corporations have to understand that we are consumer based, and we will not align with corporations who do not align with our values. I want to be very clear. That means we're going to recognize that we will spend our dollars where the dollars are spent on our interests. The constituent strategy is also clear. Your voting record as a candidate, my friends, if you are running for office, hear me, Black women are the most consistent voting bloc in this country. Your partisan affiliation will not protect you in this moment. So if you're not aligned with the African American community, with the communities around this table, you are not aligned with our voting opportunities. For the 435 members of the House, the Senate runners, and the government leaders that are on the state level, we are watching and we will find out where you'll vote. The last thing is a commitment strategy. We're asking our organizations and affiliates across the country to commit to Black families, Black businesses, and yes, to Black institutions alike. Making 64 cents on every one white male dollar can no longer stand. We'll close the gap, and NCNW will stand with our voting power, our economic power, but also our people power. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greg Horton with the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans. It is, in fact, an election year. I want to be clear, we are not telling people who to vote for, but to our community, voting is the single most powerful act we can do to express our values and put this country on the right course. Now, to the companies, it's been a tough day for you all. Many of us have brought legitimate critiques to you all, and I will only add, as you all desperately try to contort yourselves to fly below the radar, let me tell you what we see. We see companies who, when they want something, when they want access, when they want regulatory relief, when they want that tax break, they can marshal enormous resources that vastly outweigh anything that everyday Americans can do, right? The other thing we see is that you also espouse these values of being good community partners. You are watching in real time as our communities are under attack, and suddenly you lose that voice. We see that, right? As my colleagues have said, silence is a choice, and it's certainly not neutral. Now, to elected officials and candidates of every party, your legacy will be defined by how you use your platform right now. We are in a race to the bottom. When truth and integrity are sacrificed for clicks and monetization, you are given incredible privilege, protection, and status, yet so many of you abuse and devalue public trust. And that is why so many Americans, fair or unfair, see Democrats and Republicans of two sides of the same trick coin that never flip in their favor. Now, I'll close in speaking to the ANHPI community. Friends, we are watching in real time whether American democracy can survive an attempt to violently reclaim power and redefine who is considered American and who has access to that power. Yes, they will let some of us in, but let me assure you, we are not part of their plan. I will say this as well, and CAPA is a coalition of 46 national ANHPI organizations. We know how hard coalition work can be. But I want to remind everybody, a coalition is not about agreeing on everything. It is about recognizing that we're going to disagree on things, but there's so much that we can agree on, so much that we can work together on. So if there was ever a time for all of our communities to demand diversity and frankly demand more, it's right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. As we begin to close this event, I want to thank Marc and Tara and everyone with the National Urban League for convening us and continuing this important conversation. I want to, I guess, leave you with four main points. One is that as we seek to do our work, we're living in a time without rules, without norms, where old ways will not change the oppression that we seek to dismantle. Two, we must be the change that we seek in this world. Each of us in coalition must be that change. As others have said, we must control and define for ourselves the narrative for the defense of equal opportunity, civil rights, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and justice. We cannot let this administration define those values for us. And to recall the words of Fannie Hamer, nobody's free until everybody's free. Since 1971, the Southern Poverty Law Center has worked in coalition with many of you to advance racial justice and equal opportunity and a multiracial democracy where all of us can live and thrive. For us, leadership begins within SPLC, where we are seeking to live our own values and to establish a vibrant, diverse, inclusive, equitable, and accessible workplace. At SPLC, we fight every day against unfair policies and practices that harm individuals and communities across the South and beyond. We seek to hold local, state, and federal public and private sector leaders accountable to the people and consumers that they serve. We use every tool at our disposal, our research teams, our education platforms, our policy advocates, and our legal teams to advance our common mission. We need leaders more than ever in this country who have courage to say what is right and what is wrong, who acknowledge the dignity of every person, and who will speak out against injustices in all of its forms and faces. This year at SPLC, we have decided to prioritize two of the pillars of our work around poverty, seeking to reduce poverty and promote economic mobility, and also our work around democracy and voting rights, seeking to protect free and fair elections. For us at SPLC, poverty is not a line. It is a policy choice, as others have described. It requires an end to unjust systems that deny all persons access to the opportunity to sustain the basic necessities of life. As for voting rights, our coalition must speak directly to the 90 million people who did not participate and engage in the last election. We must hear their voices, we must hear their grievances, we must understand why so many of our fellow Americans have sat out elections. We must bring them back, we must connect with them, we must listen and value their voices. Thank you very much.
For faith communities across the United States, demanding diversity is a spiritual and a moral imperative. while President Trump said this week that God is very proud of his actions in his first year in office, we know that it is unholy to deny Americans equal opportunity while claiming God's favor. Faith communities will not cooperate, and faith communities will not capitulate, because we are drawing courage from a deep well that no political regime's fear and bullying will ever contaminate. We've seen faith in action this year. Bishop Marianne Budde was one of the few leaders in any sector to confront the president to his face and plead for mercy for immigrants and the LGBTQ community. When Georgetown Law School came under attack for its DEI policies, the dean leaned into its Jesuit mission to make sure society is more inclusive and diverse. We've seen faith groups across the country join our campaign at Interfaith Alliance called Choose Love, Not ICE, to respond to the blatantly racist immigration cruelty we're seeing from this administration. None of this is new. Faith communities have been on the forefront of every advance for civil rights and equality under the law in American history, and faith communities will be on the front lines in 2026. Faith communities demand that religious diversity be respected, and we will exercise our religious freedom right to dissent and never bend a knee to this administration. We demand that politicians and corporations, while they debate diversity policies and diversity statements, we know that God has already spoken. Every person is equal in rights and dignity, and may we, everyone around this table, make it so.
My name is Darrell Rabhan, Senior Vice President at Common Cause. On behalf of the 1 million members of Common Cause, we'd like to thank Marc, Morial, Tara, and the National Urban League for their consistent and persistent leadership on this issue. We're only 1 year into Trump's second term. Let's be real, we've never had a president or an administration that has done this much damage this quickly. That means heading into 2026, we the people will demand more from candidates and corporations than ever before. When we look at today's political polarization and breakdowns of our democracy, you really have to follow the money if you can. The 2010 Citizens United decision unleashed a flood of unprecedented corporate spending in our elections, giving a bigger voice to wealthy special interests and eroding our campaign finance laws. This has made it easier than ever for big money and special interests to drown out the voices of everyday Americans on issues that impact their daily lives and our collective future. And the Trump administration has made it clear you can pay to play for power and influence. This administration is picking winners and losers based on what favors they've done for Donald Trump or how loyal they will be to Donald Trump. For example, Elon Musk. But it's not just Elon Musk. Trump and his administration has attacked colleges and universities, law firms, and businesses for their diversity practices, and sadly, a lot of them gave in. Some even paid him for his attacks. A lot of people are talk about democracy like it's going to protect itself, or like someone or something is going to save us. The truth is, it's our responsibility to make sure democracy holds. And right now, there's really no federal presence working to enforce laws and hold candidates and corporations to accounts like in decades past, or even to enforce the Constitution. This means we, the people, must flex our own power with our vote and with our pockets. For candidates, accountability looks like calling it like it is, naming authoritarian or illegal tactics for what they are, and having the bravery to endorse legislation against it. Beyond the threat of a crumbling democracy or losing our constitutional rights, our people are still suffering today. As candidates, will you work to bring down the cost of living, or will you take away health care and food for families and children? Will you accept money from big oil, big pharma, big tech, big ag, or will you be like David to these Goliath industries and dare to bring them down? Now is not the time for status quo. Those who can't meet these standards or this moment must not run. For corporations, we must use our power and our pocket to deny business to organizations or people enabling this administration. To answer the question for this round, what does accountability look like for candidates and corporations heading into 2026? I turn to the wisdom of Frederick Douglass. It is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. It's time to agitate, agitate, agitate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Being the elder at the table, I'm the OG. I want to thank Marc, Morial, Tara, and all the National Urban League. But also, before I get into my 1-minute comment, I want to thank all the colleagues around this round table. We've been live streamed, so millions of Americans are watching and listening. If you could just pan around this table, this is America. This is the United States of America. And while there are those in the White House, those in Congress, those in the Supreme Court, those in state legislatures, those in some governor's offices, some attorney general's office, deny the very demographic blessing that God has given America with increased diversity in spite of the suppression. Now, I've been asked to comment on the historic and ongoing role of the black press as a pillar of democracy, informing communities, documenting truth, and holding power accountable. I'm here on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. I'm Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr. This year marks the 199th year of the Black Press of America. Been around for a while. Next year is the 200th anniversary of the bicentennial of the Black Press. But I feel I'm obligated not only to speak on behalf of the Black press, but also the Latino press, the Asian American press, the Native American press, and progressive white press. We all have felt the damp hands of oppression and suppression over the last 12 months. I'm gonna be very honest with you. We've lost advertising revenue 80% over the last 12 months. We have been knocked down, but we have not been knocked out. We're gonna rebound. 2026 elections. This is the payback year. We have to organize, we have to mobilize, and we have to take our messaging, take our values, take our principles, take the law, everything that everybody said, but we've got to work together. Marc, we got to hold this coalition together after this meeting. We got to be meeting regularly. We got to be organizing regularly. James Baldwin said to me once, words do matter. Our expressions do matter. If in point our expressions and words represent the interests of our constituencies, of our people. We need the largest voter turnout in American history in November 2026. That's our responsibility. God bless the Urban League. God bless all of our organizations. We're not going to give up. We're going to fight, and we're going to fight back, fight back, fight back, fight back, fight back.
Thank you. One more time for Reverend Benjamin Chavis, who has helped us. Before I close, join me in thanking Tara Murray, and I also want to thank the team at the National Urban League Washington Bureau and our other departments, the tech team, the marketing and communications team, the Office of General Counsel, all who collaborated to support this event. Please give them a round of applause. And then there were many of you whose staff assisted in participating and in preparing and who worked together all the time. I think they deserve a warm round of applause. A thank you. in need very much. And then, as I sit here, it's been stated a number of times, we represent the American family. We represent not only the American family, we represent the future of the United States of America. It should not be lost on us that this conversation takes place at America 250, on the 250th anniversary of this nation. But it should not be lost on us that it is also taking place 62 years after another generation of civil rights, social justice, economic opportunity leaders stood at the White House behind a president as he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the American Magna Carta, the document which changed the arc of American history, the document to which many of us owe our careers, owe our ascendancy, and many in our community owe a very changed America. It's ironic that at this moment, instead of standing with the president to reaffirm the principles of 1964, or to reaffirm the vision of America at America 250, that we have to come together in the true spirit of American democracy to use the power of the First Amendment to challenge our own government on an issue and issues of fundamental fairness and rights. It's ironic, but it's necessary. It's ironic, but is what we as a generation are called to do. I am thankful to all of you for demonstrating intelligence, courage, conviction, and a commitment to be a part of this growing movement and this growing coalition. Your willingness to stand together. We look around this table and we are black, and we are white, and we are Latino and Asian. We are LGBTQ, we are Arab, we're Jewish, we're indigenous, we're white. We represent every corner of the American family. And that is a proud moment for the thousands who are watching us, because we represent all of them in this room. Now, today we learned a number of things. We learned a number of things. We learned that the great divide on the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion is manufactured. It is as though we're back in the 1600s, where some asserted that the world was flat. Or sometimes I view it as an allegory that orange juice can come from cows. And we've also learned that we want this nation to follow the law and the Constitution, not the lies. And that we want leaders, whether they be political or business or faith, not to capitulate to this anti-DE&I assault, because to capitulate is a choice, not a mandate. Diversity is not illegal. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not unconstitutional. And leaders who retreat are misreading the market, they're misreading their customers. Politicians who retreat are misreading their voters. So we are going to stand at this moment. And our next steps will include the pledge for American equal opportunity, democracy, and opportunity. It is a pledge that I'm going to invite you to work with us on together. And that will be a pledge that we will say to those that want our vote in 2026, that when you sign this pledge, you're indicating that you're willing to earn our vote. It's time that we change the conversation. We have too many people who are our allies who participate in political drive-by politics. We have too many people who claim to be our allies who pray uptown and play downtown. They have one message on the east side, another message on the west side, and they hide on the north side and come to parades on the south side. We have to change the conversation. We got to challenge everyone running for office to stand as we have stood today, where the American people are rooted. This polling data, this research information should once again demonstrate that notwithstanding all of the assaults of the last year, the American people are saying no and hell no to these assaults on diversity, equity, and inclusion, economic opportunity, indeed, and democracy. So I am so pleased that all of you have joined us today, and we commit that this is not the end, that this is just yet another step that we are going to take together. We're going to work together with all of you, and we need to take this message as has been repeated. We've got to send a message that we will litigate, we will legislate, we'll use our pocketbooks, we'll use our votes, and we will stand up to this assault on our history, on our democracy, and on our Constitution. So once again, we want to thank, and we're going to give hands, a big hand, to those who are listening online. We've got thousands of people. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Thank them for participating with us. And once again, it is indeed my pleasure. We are the Demand Diversity Roundtable. We are civil rights, social justice, and economic opportunity leaders, and collectively, we have authorized this message. Thank you all very much for joining us today.
Congratulations.
Very good.
Oh, thanks, Mark, for everything. We'll get on.
Oh, yeah. Let's stand in front. We're going to take a photo. Yeah, front of the table.